Every summer, the Holloway family returned to the same house, the same creaky floors, the same scent of pine and dust, and the same stories about the grandparents who once lived there. But this year, something was different. The car crunched up the gravel driveway, spitting dust into the hazy afternoon light. For the Holloways, this was more than a vacation. It was a ritual. Tom and Sarah unloaded the bags while their children, 6-year-old Ellie and 4-year-old Max, raced toward the porch. The old house stood silent, a sentinel of memory, seemingly untouched by time. It was a place where their family history felt tangible, held within the very wood and stone. Inside, the air was thick with the familiar smell of lavender and old paper. As they walked down the hallway, their footsteps echoing on the worn floorboards, they passed the 2 portraits that had hung there for as long as anyone could remember. Grandma and Grandpa Holloway, captured in oil paint, their smiles gentle and knowing. Ellie, however, stopped and tilted her head. "Mommy," she whispered, her small finger pointing. They looked different. Sarah glanced at the portraits, then back at her daughter. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "They look the same as always." "No," Ellie insisted, her brow furrowed. "Their eyes are happier." Tom chuckled from the doorway. "Maybe they're just happy to see you." Later that night, tucked into the antique bed she always slept in, Ellie told her parents, "Grandma and Grandpa came to my room. They sang me a song." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, her heart swelling with a bittersweet warmth. "That's nice, honey. They're watching over you." Tom smiled, leaning against the doorframe. It was just the sort of thing a child would say in a place so full of stories. But as they closed the door, a quiet, unspoken truth hung between them. Grandma and Grandpa Holloway had died in a car accident 10 years ago. The whispers began on the second night. Ellie woke to a faint, sibilant sound from the hallway, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She crept out of bed and peered through the crack in her door. 2 figures stood in the moonlit corridor, their silhouettes tall and gaunt against the floral wallpaper. They were turned towards her room, perfectly still, their faces obscured by shadow. But she could feel their smiles, wide and unblinking. They whispered, their voices a rustling harmony that didn't sound quite human. "We've missed you, little bird. We've been so lonely." The next morning, Max sat on the living room rug, scribbling furiously in a coloring book. But he wasn't drawing cars or animals. He was drawing strange, interlocking symbols, spirals connected by sharp, angular lines. When Sarah asked what he was doing, he looked up, his expression serious. "Grandpa is teaching me," he said simply. "It's the language of the house." Tom and Sarah exchanged a worried glance, but dismissed it as the vivid imagination of a 4-year-old, fueled by the house's atmosphere. Their unease grew, however, when Tom was fixing a loose floorboard in the dining room. He pried up the plank and froze. Carved into the dark, dusty wood of the subfloor were the exact same symbols Max had been drawing. Ancient, precise, and deeply unsettling. The house wasn't just old. It was marked. The feeling that something was deeply wrong became a constant, gnawing presence. Sarah couldn't shake Ellie's words about the portraits. She found herself drawn to the attic, a place filled with forgotten treasures and layers of dust. While searching through an old trunk, her fingers brushed against something hard hidden beneath a pile of yellowed linens. It was a small, leather-bound journal. The real Grandma Holloway's journal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The entries were filled with mundane details of country life, but as the dates progressed, the tone shifted. Fear began to bleed through the elegant cursive. The final entry, scrawled in a frantic, almost illegible hand, was dated the day before she and Grandpa died. It read, "They are not us anymore. They wear our faces, but they are hollow. They whisper from the cellar. They want the children. They promise to wait. They say family is forever, but this isn't family. It's hunger, The cellar door in the kitchen was always kept locked, a heavy iron bolt securing it shut. But when Sarah confronted the children, their answers chilled her to the bone. They said they'd been inside. They'd played games with Grandma and Grandpa in the dark. They described things no child should know: circles drawn in salt, names that twisted the tongue, and voices that answered from behind the glass of old mirrors. They said Grandpa showed them how the walls could breathe and how memories could be eaten. That night, the house began to change. It was no longer a passive container of memories. It was actively rewriting itself. The walls seemed to groan and shift, hallways stretching into impossible lengths. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall became erratic, its hands spinning backward, then forward, then stopping altogether. The laws of time and space were fraying at the edges. Ellie disappeared. For one whole night, she was gone. They searched everywhere, their frantic calls swallowed by the oppressive silence. She reappeared the next morning, sitting on the porch swing as if nothing had happened. But she was different. The light in her eyes was gone, replaced by a placid, unnerving calm. She was silent, watching them with an ancient patience. Then Max began speaking in a voice that was not his own. It was a low, resonant baritone, a composite of a dozen different voices speaking at once. It spoke of things buried beneath the foundations, of a pact made with the land itself. The soil remembers, it rasped from his small chest. The wood remembers. And we remember you. Panic finally set in. Tom grabbed the car keys. We're leaving. Now. They herded the children out into the twilight, but the car wouldn't start. The engine just clicked, a dead, metallic sound. Tom looked up, his blood running cold. The road, the gravel driveway they had driven up just days before, was gone. In its place was an impenetrable wall of ancient, gnarled trees that hadn't been there an hour ago. They were trapped. The house was no longer a house. It was a memory trap, a stomach digesting them slowly. Driven by a desperate, primal need to confront the source of this nightmare, Tom smashed the lock on the cellar door and descended into the damp, earthy blackness. Sarah stood at the top of the stairs, clutching a silent Ellie to her side. Down in the cellar, two figures stood waiting in the gloom. It was them, the shapes from the hallway, the entities wearing the faces of Grandma and Grandpa. But as Tom raised his flashlight, their true forms were revealed. They were not human. Their limbs were elongated, their bodies impossibly thin, stitched together from strips of faded family photographs and pieces of old furniture. Where their eyes should have been were just smooth, blank expanses of skin. They were effigies of memory, even monstrous life. They spoke in unison, their voice the sound of 1,000 whispered secrets. We are the memory you left behind. You fed us with your stories. You nourished us with your love. Tom stared in horror as he realized the truth. These things weren't ghosts. They were something far older, Lovecraftian parasites that fed on nostalgia and familial bonds. The house was their hunting ground, and the family's love for the grandparents was the bait. The children were the key, they chimed, their faceless heads tilting. Their pure belief gave us form. Every bedtime story, every photograph you showed them, every happy memory you shared, it made us strong. It made us real. Tom screamed, a raw, hopeless sound that was cut short as the cellar door slammed shut, plunging him into absolute darkness. Upstairs, the house finally went silent. A year later, a new car crunches up the gravel driveway. A new family steps out, excited for their summer retreat. A little girl with bright eyes runs ahead, bursting through the front door. "Mom!" she calls back, her voice echoing in the hall. Grandma and Grandpa are already here. Her mother smiles, relieved they've settled in so well. High above, in the dusty attic window, two tall figures stand in the shadows. They are still. They are smiling. And they are waiting. If this story made your skin crawl, can your memories feel? Uncertain, Subscribe for more Tailies where the past isn't dead, it's just waiting. Like, share, and comment. Because sometimes the ones who love you most aren't even human anymore.